Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you've spent any time working in sustainability or procurement, you've probably heard people say we need better Scope 3 data. But what does that actually mean? Is it supplier emissions, purchase orders, carbon footprints, or something else entirely? In today's video, we're going to answer exactly that. We'll look at what Scope 3 data really is, why it matters so much, and how companies like Microsoft, Apple, IKEA, and Unilever are approaching it in practice. Let's get into it. Here's something interesting. The phrase Scope 3 data sounds simple, but different teams inside the same company often mean completely different things by it. Ask someone in finance and they'll think about spend records. Ask someone in procurement and they'll think about suppliers and purchase orders. Ask someone in sustainability and they'll think about carbon footprints. None of them are wrong. They're just looking at different pieces of the same puzzle. That's exactly why Scope 3 feels confusing the moment a company starts trying to measure it. Before we define it properly, it helps to understand why this even matters. For most businesses, Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions are actually the smaller part of the story. Scope 1, the emissions you produce directly, is usually under 5%. Scope 2, from the energy you buy, sits around 10%. The rest, often somewhere between 70 and 95%, is Scope 3. That's everything happening across the value chain. Your suppliers, your transport providers, the products you buy, even what happens after your product reaches the customer. Most of that sits outside your direct control, which is exactly why it's so hard to measure. So let's define it properly. Scope 3 data is the information a company needs to calculate emissions across its value chain. Notice I said information, not emissions. Emissions don't just appear. They're calculated, and calculating them means pulling together a lot of different pieces. It's not a single data set, it's many data sets working together. It spans multiple teams: finance, procurement, logistics, suppliers, and it improves over time, starting as rough estimates and getting sharper as better detail comes in. Think of it like baking a cake. Flour on its own isn't enough. You need every ingredient to get the full picture. For Scope 3, those ingredients are things like purchases, suppliers, transport, energy use, manufacturing, and life cycle data. Leave one out and the picture is incomplete. So where does this information actually come from? Usually four places. Procurement knows who you bought from. Finance knows what you spent. Suppliers know what went into making the product. Logistics knows how it moved. Bring those four together and you get a Scope 3 emissions calculation. No single team owns this data. The whole exercise depends on all four working from the same numbers. The GHG protocol, which is the standard most companies follow, breaks this down into 14 categories. 7 sit upstream, covering things like purchase goods, capital goods, business travel, and employee commuting. 7 sit downstream, covering how products are used, transported, and eventually disposed of once they leave the business. That's the full map of where Scope 3 emissions can occur. Now, within all of that, there are really three types of data companies use, and understanding the difference matters a lot. The first is spend data. This estimates emissions from money spent using industry average emissions factors. If you spent £2 million on steel, you apply an average factor for steel and get an estimate. It's quick and it's a sensible place to start, but it isn't supplier specific. Two suppliers making the same product with very different energy sources would show up looking almost identical. The second is activity data. Instead of asking how much you spent, you ask what actually happened. How many kilograms of material did you buy? How many kilometers did it travel? How many liters of fuel were used? This comes from operations and procurement systems rather than finance alone, and it's a more accurate reflection of reality. The third is primary supplier data. Here, suppliers report their own facility emissions, product carbon footprints, and verified sustainability reports instead of relying on averages. It takes more effort to collect, but it shows exactly where emissions occur and which suppliers are genuinely improving. Put side by side, spend data comes from finance systems and is low effort but low accuracy. Activity data comes from procurement and operations and sits in the middle. Primary data comes straight from suppliers and takes the most effort but gives the highest accuracy. Most companies end up using all three at once, weighted differently depending on the category and how mature a given supplier relationship is. So, what does this actually look like in practice? Let's look at 4 companies that have publicly shared how they approach it. Start with Microsoft. Microsoft asks suppliers to report their emissions and ties sustainability performance directly to procurement decisions. The goal isn't just to collect data for a report, it's to improve supplier performance using that data. Then there's Apple. Apple works closely with its manufacturing partners to understand emissions as they shift towards renewable electricity. That gives Apple visibility into exactly where reductions are happening across the supply chain, not just where emissions occur. IKEA takes a broader view. It tracks emissions across materials, manufacturing, and logistics and uses that data as an input into sourcing and product design decisions, not simply as a reporting requirement. And Unilever, with thousands of suppliers worldwide, combines procurement data with direct supplier engagement. As the data gets better, the company can prioritize its reduction efforts more effectively. These are all illustrative examples based on public reporting, but the pattern is consistent. As companies move from spend data to activity data to primary data, the accuracy and usefulness of that data for actual decisions increases at every step. Better data shows which suppliers are genuinely improving and where engagement is worth focusing. Of course, none of this is easy. The common challenges are low supplier response rates, inconsistent data formats between suppliers, finance, and operations systems that don't talk to each other, and the ongoing challenge of verifying that reported data is accurate. If you're facing these problems right now, that's completely normal. It's not a reason to wait before you start measuring, because here's the payoff. Better data enables targeted supplier engagement instead of blanket outreach. It enables reliable emissions forecasting. It enables reduction planning based on real priorities instead of guesswork. And it means better decisions can be made before contracts are even signed. These are business outcomes, not compliance boxes to tick. Put it all together and you get a clear path forward. Data collection leads to emissions measurement. Emissions measurement leads to supplier engagement, and supplier engagement leads to decarbonization. Each stage builds on the one before it. You can't engage suppliers or plan reductions without the data first. So, to bring this together, Scope 3 data is a journey, not a single spreadsheet. Start with estimates and improve with activity data over time. Engage suppliers directly to get the clearest picture. And remember that the focus should always shift from estimating emissions towards actually reducing them. Progress beats perfection. Every step towards better data is a step towards a better decision. That's what Scope 3 data really is and why it matters so much right now. What's your biggest Scope 3 data challenge? Let us know in the comments. We read every one. And if you'd like more practical videos on Scope 3, supplier engagement, and decarbonization, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.